On Friday, October 23, 2009, two men attempted to break into a home in Carroll, Iowa. They were unsuccessful, unsurprisingly as it turned out, and fled the scene as a witness was on the phone with 911. That witness reported that the would-be burglars fled in a large white car. Police responding to the incident came across a white 1994 Buick Roadmaster, which fit that description just a few blocks from the scene, and made a traffic stop on the vehicle. When the vehicle's two occupants were approached, it was clearly evident that they were the people being sought. When I tell you what they did to disguise themselves, keep in mind that Halloween was right around the corner, but they either forgot that or couldn't be bothered to buy a couple of cheap masks to hide their identity. These two smooth brains decided to draw masks on their faces with permanent magic marker. And I'm not making that up. Both men were charged with attempted second-degree burglary, with the driver also being charged with DWI. Matthew McNally, the driver, and Joey Miller, his passenger, might have just set the absolute lowest bar for inclusion in the chosen few. And given that one of the stories I've covered was about a man who shot his own wiener while robbing a wiener store, that's saying something. On December 15, 2017, police say this smooth-brained individual, 32-year-old Jesse Berube, attempted to break into a Citrus Heights, California business by descending through a narrow chimney, which, given the holiday season at the time, kinda puts a new spin on Bad Santa. Unlike the jolly gift-giving elf, however, Mr. Berube was found lacking in the magic department and got stuck in the chimney. According to the police report, Bad Santa was able to wriggle around just enough to be able to use his phone to dial 911 and plead for a rescue. The Sacramento Fire Department showed up, and after rescuing Bad Santa from his self-induced predicament, the Citrus Heights Police Department took over, arresting Mr. Berube on a single count of burglary, and since I can no longer safely call him a douchebag without risking my channel, he is now the first of a new category we'll call the Chosen Few, which was suggested by Mary Hockenberry. In October of 2009, a man named Joseph Getz pleaded guilty to a string of 7 bank robberies across Pennsylvania and Maryland, which netted him a total of $280,274. When he attempted to rob the Susquehanna Bank in York, Pennsylvania, however, there was a slight hiccup, and his reaction to that hiccup was what led to his arrest. Getz entered the bank soon after it opened. After being told the bank had zero cash on hand, Getz got out of there in a hurry, but not before raising a ruckus and saying he intended to file a complaint with the bank's managers. A customer using the bank's drive-thru noticed the ruckus, followed Getz's car as he fled the scene, and called the police, who then made a traffic stop and arrested Getz on suspicion of attempted bank robbery, in turn leading to the police connecting him to his successful robberies and earning him a 9-year prison sentence, 2 years of supervised release, and his selection to the Chosen Few, all because he was upset he couldn't rob the bank. This might be a Florida man / Florida woman story for the record books. On Sunday, December 3, 2017, John Arwood and Amber Campbell trespassed at the Daytona State College Marine and Environmental Science Center, where they claim someone chased them into a janitorial closet, then locked them inside. It took the pair 2 days to call 911 to rescue them from their plight. When the Daytona Beach police arrived to effect that rescue, what they found was interesting. Making entry into the closet, the cops found what was suspected to be drug paraphernalia and human waste. Do you want to know what they didn't find? A locked door. But not only was the closet door not locked, it was unable to be locked. They could have left that room whenever they chose to do so. Arwood and Campbell were both charged with trespassing, with Ms. Campbell catching an additional charge for violating her probation. Apparently, testing the doorknob never crossed the minds of Florida man and Florida woman, firmly ensconcing them among the chosen few. In 2016, a Cottonwood, Arizona Bank of America branch learned that someone had systematically stolen around $5,000 between July and September of that year, although that theft wasn't discovered and reported until October. For unspecified reasons, bank officials suspected employee Alberto Lopez of the theft. Lopez, for his part, did nothing to allay those suspicions, as he immediately quit his job and moved to Phoenix. He also avoided police investigators, missing interview appointments and the like for well over a year, resulting in an arrest warrant being issued. Somewhere along the way, however, Lopez lost the plot because in December of 2017, he made the incredibly smooth-brained decision to apply for an open dispatcher position at, wait for it, the Cottonwood Police Department. Yes, you did hear that correctly. One routine background check later, and the arrest warrant was naturally discovered. Cottonwood PD scheduled an interview with Mr. Lopez for January 4, 2018, where he was immediately arrested, making himself one of the chosen few in the process. In December 2017, a shoplifter at a Massachusetts Walmart made a failed attempt to disable an anti-theft device normally found on most expensive and commonly stolen items at most retail stores. Now, from my experience working assets protection at Target, most anti-theft devices are fairly easy to defeat and/or remove, although I won't explain further, so don't ask. The ones with the wire wrap and electronic lock, however, not so much, which is precisely the device used in this case. That said, this particular shoplifter tried a very novel way in their attempt: Play-Doh. Why Play-Doh was thought capable of foiling said device is a mystery to me, but after the failed attempt, the thief made a hasty escape from the Walmart. What the shoplifter attempted to steal wasn't specified, but it was likely something expensive enough to justify the unusual step of running the nearly perfect fingerprints that were left in the Play-Doh. A few months later, those fingerprints led to the arrest of one Dennis Jackson, a man with a lengthy criminal record and arrest warrants in at least 2 other states at the time of his arrest for this incident. Imagine the feeling of getting arrested for the crime of unlawfully removing an anti-theft device because you used a children's toy to do it, and becoming one of the chosen few in the process. I'm a big believer in the power of love. After all, I met my wife of nearly 18 years literally by accident, which is kind of a funny story in and of itself, one that I might someday tell, although it does lack a criminal element to it. This, however, is not that kind of story. It's a Sunday night, September 2009, Columbus, Ohio's North Side. Diana Martinez and a companion were sitting and talking in a car outside of Diana's apartment building when 3 men approached them. Stefan Bennett and 2 unnamed accomplices then attempted to rob the 2 women, at one point even pointing a firearm at Diana's head. According to a news report from shortly after the robbery attempt, Diana opened the car door and began screaming, which caused the men to abandon the attempt and run away. One important thing to note is that the thieves were confident enough to not cover their faces, or at least Mr. Bennett didn't. Perhaps a bit too confident, much to Bennett's eventual chagrin. Less than 2 hours later, Ms. Martinez exited her apartment to find Stefan Bennett had returned, alone. He wasn't there to rob her this time, however, but his reason for returning to the scene of the crime will blow your mind. In what might just be the ultimate smooth-brained decision of all time, he was there to ask Miss Martinez out on a date, and no, that was not a joke. Diana kept Bennett talking while her cousin called the police, who arrived shortly thereafter to take Bennett into custody. I have no idea what was going through his mind to return to the scene of the crime to ask for a date with the woman he just attempted to rob. But whatever they were, those thoughts are what made Stefan Bennett one of the chosen few. It's 2017, Halloween to be more precise, and at around 6 o'clock that morning, this smooth brain, Terrion Pouncey, decided to rob, at gunpoint, the Maxwell Street Express, a well-known hot dog joint in Chicago's South Side. He ordered the 2 employees to empty the register and hand over their wallets, which they did, but in the process of doing so, they knocked over a bucket of grease, in turn sending the bills flying all over the place. Rounding up as much of the loose money as he could as quickly as possible, Pouncey stuffed the pistol in the front of his waistband. As he made his escape, however, he adjusted the weapon one final time, but he was careless about it and accidentally pulled the trigger, shooting himself in his wiener after robbing a wiener store. Karma can be quick and funny. Pouncey called 911 for assistance, collapsing on the steps of a nearby house. He was arrested at the hospital a few hours later and charged with 2 counts of armed robbery. Everything stolen was recovered, and I'd say that shooting your own wiener while robbing a wiener store definitely makes you one of the chosen few. Some people should be thankful that breathing is an autonomic function, because if those people had to make a conscious effort to breathe, they just wouldn't survive. This story is about one of those people, and it's a Florida man story, naturally. On the 13th of August 2008, a man broke into the Junkanoo Bar in Fort Myers Beach, Florida after it had closed for the night. He wasn't after money. He just wanted a drink to celebrate his birthday, and he was in the right place. It just wasn't the right time of day. In the process of breaking in, the burglar tripped the alarm, which, by all accounts, was not a silent alarm. During the burglary,
in which the thief only managed to snag a bottle of liqueur, the alarm company, ADT, called the bar, and this smooth brain actually answered the phone. Did he stop proving his stupidity there? No. No, he did not. Because he gave the alarm company his real name. And I am not making this up. The perpetrator also failed to cover his face, so the surveillance cameras got some very clear shots of him. It's here that reports start to diverge. One report simply states that the police tracked him down with the evidence the thief unwittingly provided. At least one other report, however, says that the thief returned to the bar the next day, this time during business hours, when an employee who had seen the surveillance video recognized him and proceeded to call the police. Meet Christopher Cron, the latest contestant for The Chosen Few. He was 47 at the time of the break-in, with an arrest record, at least in Florida, that dates back to 2005 and has continued throughout the years, including an unbelievable 6 arrests in 2023, which is the latest date on record, again, at least in Florida. I really need to stop asking how dumb people can get. This is getting out of hand. Let me ask you a question. If you committed some crimes, got convicted of said crimes, but took off before your sentencing and were on the run from the police, would you then put yourself on a dating app? I'm going to assume most of you said no. I mean, I certainly wouldn't. Hell, most normal people wouldn't. This guy, however, this guy isn't exactly a normal person. Meet Wayne Parker. Mr. Parker was convicted in October of 2022 of defrauding suppliers and creditors of £765,000. That's around $970,000 for my American friends, so quite a hefty sum. He was scheduled to be sentenced in February of 2023 in Ipswich Crown Court, but skipped town before that could happen. The inevitable arrest warrant was then issued. Except no one could find him. Nobody knew where he was, or if they did know, they weren't talking. Parker was in the wind for over 7 months. He went completely undetected. Well, he was undetected until he put a profile on Match.com, and as much as I wish that was a joke, it isn't. How the police tumbled onto his profile wasn't mentioned in any of the stories I read, but the amazing thing is that it wasn't what got him caught. He was caught on the very last day of August 2023 during a routine traffic stop, of all things. When he was finally sentenced in September of 2023, he got 5 years for fraud, absconding, fleeing sentencing, as well as some animal welfare offenses. Seriously, if you were on the run from the law post-conviction and pre-sentencing, shouldn't you be keeping the lowest possible profile? Parker did pretty well right up until he went all smooth brain and tried to get a date online. Now, it's certainly reasonable to assume that dating websites would be fairly low on the law enforcement watch list, but why take the chance? Of course, if he hadn't taken that chance, he wouldn't have secured his place among the chosen few. Everyone on the planet should know by now that producing counterfeit US currency is one of the hardest things you can possibly try to do. The paper, the inks, even the colors of those inks are very unique and almost impossible to faithfully duplicate. Let's not mention the nearly invisible security strip embedded in most bills. It might have been easier back in 2013 to counterfeit, but I doubt it was appreciably so. None of that, however, stopped the next smooth brain from trying. Meet Jared Carr. His claim to fame, as it were, stems from an incident in 2013 at the Walmart in Village of Lake Hallie, Wisconsin, after trying to return a printer that he claimed was defective. Unfortunately for him, he failed to put the paper tray back in the box, nor did he remember the installation disc. When the service desk employees noticed that those items were absent, they gave the printer an even closer look. That's when they found a sheet of paper in the printer. A sheet of paper that had 2 $100 bills printed on it, with a third spot that looks suspiciously like another bill had been there, but had been carefully cut out. The Walmart employees did all they could to accommodate Mr. Carr, but the man just wouldn't take no for an answer. A smarter man would have realized his mistake after one of the workers pointedly returned the sheet of paper to him, cut his losses, and noped out of there. But Mr. Carr wasn't that smart. He insisted on getting a refund, even if it was just half the purchase price. Still he was refused, and still he refused to accept that answer. Until the police got there, that is. That's when he decided it might just be time to beat feet, except it was too late. After the police learned what was going on, Jared Carr was arrested and charged with attempted theft by fraud, forgery, and resisting arrest. It was also determined that a neighboring jurisdiction had felony arrest warrants out for him for armed robbery and burglary. I can't find what, if any, sentences he received, but I kinda hope they were substantial. Let me get this straight. You want to return a printer without a receipt, no less, even though you neglected to include all of the parts, left a sheet of paper in said printer that clearly incriminates you in a counterfeiting operation, refused to leave the store after your return was denied, and raised enough of a fuss that the police are called to remove you. And you did all of that knowing you had 2 felony warrants. Mr. Carr gives new meaning to the phrase, "if stupid was a person," but he is now one of the chosen few. In June of 2023, police were called to the Juicy Crab in Austell, Georgia, after a group of people ate around $100 worth of food, then failed to pay the bill. As the group drove away, a restaurant employee got a picture of their license plate. It was the perfect evidence for the police when they arrived in response to the restaurant's call about the incident. Unfortunately for the owner of the car, not only did the police now have his license plate number, they also had his cell phone, which he had inadvertently left behind in the booth the group had occupied. And on that phone, the picture on the lock screen appeared to be a selfie of the driver. With those 2 pieces of evidence, police very quickly determined the identity of the driver, one Brian Garfield Fort. It was also determined that Mr. Fort was wanted in DeKalb County for murder. It was just a few short hours before he was arrested in Brookhaven thanks to a hit on his license plate. He was charged with murder, receiving stolen property, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, although the latter 2 charges have since been dropped. At the time of this recording, he appears to still be in custody awaiting trial on the murder charge. Oh, and the reason he's a convicted felon is because he was arrested in 2022 for showing up to a high school football game carrying a shotgun and 2 handguns, so he seems to have a history of making smooth-brained decisions. If you're going to run up a large bill at a restaurant, it might be a good idea to not leave your cell phone behind when you skip out on that bill. It's even worse when you're already wanted for a violent crime and the lock screen on your phone is a selfie. And that would be how Brian Garfield Fort wound up in the chosen few. I have yet another rentahitman.com story, and this one is far, far worse than hiring a hitman to end your ex-husband like Wendy Ween, or trying to become a hitman like Josiah Garcia. All parties are innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. With that legal disclaimer out of the way, on with the video. And y'all ain't gonna believe this one. Meet Jasmine Paez. 18-year-old Jasmine met 18-year-old Gamaliel Sosa. The 2 liked each other right away, but Sosa said they couldn't be together. The problem keeping them apart was a child. More specifically, Jasmine's 3-year-old son. According to text messages between the 2, Sosa would not be with her if she didn't get rid of the kid. Jasmine, heartbroken but determined, initially lied to Sosa and told him she'd taken the boy into the woods to either be eaten by bears or drown. Sosa, however, wanted pictures proving the child was truly gone. Jasmine obviously didn't have pictures. After some thought, however, she came up with a plan. She was going to be with Sosa no matter what. She remembered her website she'd heard about, rentahitman.com. She filled out a form on the site and waited a day or 2 until someone from the site contacted her, inquiring if she still needed their services. She did. She gave the person an address that the target would definitely be at on a specific date and at a specific time. Who was the target, you ask? Her 3-year-old son, and you have no idea how much I wish I was making that up. The administrator of rentahitman.com contacted the Miami-Dade authorities several times about Paez before anyone would take him seriously, but Paez was arrested in July of 2023 and charged with unlawful use of a communications device and first-degree solicitation to commit murder. She was also ordered to stay away from her son, who began living with relatives after her arrest. Sosa was arrested in August of 2023 and charged with first-degree conspiracy to commit murder and unlawful use of a communications device. He was also ordered to have no contact with the child or even anyone under the age of 18. It would appear, at least at the time of this recording, that Paez and Sosa both posted a $15,000 bond each and are awaiting trial. Most of you don't know this, but I have a blended family. I have 4 children, but only the youngest is mine by blood. Long story short, his egg donor, and I refuse to call her his mother, essentially abandoned him on my doorstep maybe a week after he turned 1 and disappeared for about a year and a half. I had custody of him from that day on, raised him as best I could, with a lot of help from my family, until I met my wife 23 years ago. Before I met her, I'd had a few opportunities to settle down with women with whom I could have been perfectly happy, except a few of them wanted me to give up my son. It had actually gotten to the point where I resigned myself to being alone. Then I met Mrs. Hunter, and the rest, as they say, is history. I will never understand a parent giving up their child, or children, for another person. That said, the deepest, darkest, and hottest levels of hell are reserved for those who take, or plan to take, the lives of their own children. And I hope Jasmine Paez gets everything she deserves.
So here's the thing that happened. Even as jaded as I am, I'm having trouble believing it, let alone understanding it. Back in March of 2018, 25-year-old Jonathan Rivera had to appear at the Hartford, Connecticut Superior Court to answer charges of first-degree larceny and tampering with a motor vehicle, stemming from an incident in which he stole a car in February of that same year. Now, to his credit, Mr. Rivera did appear when he was supposed to, so I applaud him for that. While Mr. Rivera was in court, the parking authority was cruising around the courthouse, scanning the license plates of the vehicles parked outside, which is a fairly common thing. Now, I'm willing to bet they don't often find much, if anything, on most days when court is in session. That day, however, they did. What they found was a 2014 white Subaru Legacy that had been reported stolen from nearby Newington. The parking authority notified the police, who then started watching the car, hoping to find the driver. Who that driver wound up being wasn't exactly a surprise to them. And yes, it was exactly who you thought it was. Rivera. I am not kidding. He was quite naturally arrested and charged with second-degree larceny and taking a motor vehicle without the owner's permission. This smooth brain actually stole a car to go to court for stealing a car. I'll give you a second to let that sink in. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how one would race straight to the lead of the chosen few, the one race you do not want to win. In April of 2022, Randy Cantwell embarked on a quest in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Was it a noble quest, like saving a damsel in distress? Or maybe reuniting a lost child with their parents? Perhaps he was trying to save a bag of puppies or kittens that someone tossed in a random body of water. Not exactly. Randy Cantwell's quest this day was to acquire an Audi, as if Audis were the holy grail of automobiles. Don't get me wrong, the problem with Mr. Cantwell's quest wasn't that he was on the quest itself, it was how he went about trying to accomplish his self-appointed task. To further that task, Randy went to a car dealership in South Tulsa, expressing an interest in a particular car on the lot. Countless people do the same every day all around the world. So far, so good. One of the salespeople grabbed the keys, then took Randy to see the vehicle and go over its quirks and features, as Doug DeMuro likes to say. It was expressed to Mr. Cantwell, however, that the vehicle was not prepared for any kind of a test drive. And that's when the quest went awry. Mr. Cantwell then became Marshall Cantwell, claiming that the car in question was stolen and he was taking it for evidence. That's right, Randy said he was a federal marshal. Suspecting that wasn't true, several employees of the dealership blocked the car from leaving, forcing Cantwell to abandon the attempt and walk away. Police were called. Police arrived. Police found Mr. Cantwell and took him into custody. When asked for his identification, all Randy had with him was his driver's license. He was then questioned about his claim to be a federal marshal, and this smooth brain declared that former President Trump made him one when he declared martial law. And you have no idea how much I wish I was making that part up. I do admit to being somewhat amused by Mr. Cantwell's very novel attempt at car theft. It was certainly original, but with the end result of being charged with impersonating a law enforcement officer, it automatically places you among the chosen few. On May 30th, 2023, 25-year-old David Joseph D'Alessandro went to the Quick Stop in Sharon, South Carolina. True, this was not unusual. Hundreds, if not thousands of people visit Quick Stops every day. Perhaps he was looking for a late-night snack. Maybe he just wanted to fill up his gas tank, or even a quick stop in the restroom. It might have been that he just wanted to get some quick cash on his way home from work. Well, he was looking to grab some quick cash, but it definitely wasn't from the ATM. No, he was looking to rob the place. Witnesses recall a person entering the store wearing a hooded sweatshirt, a mask, and a wig. This person displayed the grip of what looked to be a pistol tucked into the waistband of his pants and demanded the money from the register. The clerk, understandably scared, handed over around $300. D'Alessandro then made his getaway, but apparently he didn't get too far, as the police found him in the parking lot of a nearby Dollar General. He was quickly disarmed and arrested. Now, I say disarmed, but the weapon used in the robbery wasn't a real firearm, nor was it one of the myriad of airsoft or other air-powered weapons that can and have passed as legitimate weapons. No, this weapon was much simpler, not to mention sillier, and far less believable as a genuine firearm. If he had needed to actually brandish it, he likely would have been laughed out of the store, and rightfully so. I am absolutely, positively, 100% not making this up. He used the light gun from the old Nintendo video game, Duck Hunt. He just spray painted the thing black. You cannot make this stuff up. D'Alessandro was charged with armed robbery with a deadly weapon, petty larceny under $2,000, and wearing masks and the like during the commission of a crime. I'm absolutely not advocating to commit crimes, but if you decide to use a fake weapon to do so, the least you could do is use one that looks real. You know what? Scratch that. Keep being smooth brains about it, just so I never run out of stories for the chosen few. Remember this smooth brain? This is Wendy Ween, and her main claim to fame is that she tried to use an obviously satirical website called rentahitman.com to hire someone to permanently end her ex-husband's life. Long story short, she was arrested, pled guilty, and is now spending at least 9 years in prison. I did a video about her a short while ago. At the end of that video, I mentioned that I had another story about rentahitman.com in the works. A story that's arguably even worse than the Wendy Ween story. This is that story. Say hello to Josiah Ernesto Garcia. He's a 21-year-old member of Tennessee's Air National Guard. In February of 2023, he was looking for a job, and with a child on the way, the need was becoming more pressing day after day. Unfortunately, Mr. Garcia didn't stop with looking for a regular job. You know, something he could do on the correct side of the law. No, he wanted excitement, danger, maybe a sense of mystery. A job in which he could leverage his particular set of skills. A job that allowed him to utilize his military training. I mean, he could have gone the police officer route, or maybe the security guard path, something, anything other than the road he tried to travel. What Josiah did instead was send an email with his resume to rentahitman.com. He described himself as an expert marksman with prior military service. He was actually inquiring about a position as a hitman. He wanted to be known as Reaper, which was a nickname he said, and I quote, earned from military experience and marksmanship, end quote. Garcia was, according to a follow-up email referencing his resume, looking for a job that pays well related to my military experience, shooting and killing the marked target, so I can support my kid on the way. The email also stated, what can I say? I enjoy doing what I do, so if I can find a job similar to it, such as this one, put me in, coach. Not kidding, he actually put that in an email. The administrator of rentahitman.com has said that they believe Garcia was stating his skill set matched the needs of a company that hires employees to commit murder. After the administrator asked Garcia for a headshot and his ID to accompany the resume, Garcia waited, somewhat impatiently, as it turned out, because the airman sent multiple follow-up emails, apparently eager to start working as soon as possible. Little did Garcia know, however, that his information had already been forwarded to the FBI, which then directed the administrator to send a reply, which stated, Josiah, a field coordinator will be in touch in the near future. You will receive a message when they are ready. Timing is based on client needs. a field coordinator did, in fact, contact Garcia in April. Or at least Garcia believed it was a field coordinator. In reality, it was an undercover FBI agent who asked Josiah why he wanted to be a hitman. Garcia replied that he wanted to do something similar to what he was already doing, but he wanted a flexible schedule, as he planned on attending college the next year. Garcia met with the undercover agent in person shortly thereafter, a meeting in which the agent expressed to Garcia multiple times that he did not have to do this. Garcia responded that he was looking into this for some time, apparently referring to becoming a hitman, and was looking for a way to make good money. After agreeing to eliminate a fictitious target for $5,000 and provided a down payment of $2,500, Josiah Ernesto Garcia was arrested by the FBI and charged with the use of interstate facilities in the commission of a murder for hire, which could get the soon-to-be former airman up to 10 years in a federal prison. Look, I applaud him for wanting to take care of his family. I mean, too many people try to escape that responsibility in today's world. I'd encourage any parent to do whatever they can to support their family, but don't be a smooth brain about it. In other words, do yourself a favor and refrain from dipping across that line into illegality. Mr. Garcia didn't just dip across that line, he straight up long jumped it, landing well past the point from which he could easily return and earning himself a spot among the chosen few. I've heard stories about people faking their own deaths before. It's not a new phenomenon. Usually, it's for what turns out to be relatively harmless reasons, like getting out of an extremely toxic relationship, or an abusive one, or abandoning your family, which is a very poor choice, but not exactly illegal. Most of the time, the ones we hear about are people attempting some type of insurance fraud, or criminals faking their own deaths to escape accountability for their crimes. They usually get caught, sometimes quickly. Sometimes it could take years or even decades. The overwhelming majority of the latter category generally tend to fake their deaths before or during their trials. This isn't that kind of story, though. I've looked everywhere I can think of to find a picture of the man in question, but I don't think there's any publicly available, so I've had zero luck in that department. That said, in 2019, 25-year-old Robert Berger of Huntington, New York, pled guilty to possession of a stolen vehicle and attempted grand larceny of a truck, both felonies. He was scheduled to be sentenced in October of that year and was expected to get about a year of prison time. Then his lawyer's office delivered a notice to the prosecutor that Berger died of suicide in September, along with a death certificate out of New Jersey. A very official-looking death certificate. Case closed. No need for further court proceedings, right? Not exactly. Upon closer inspection, the prosecutor noticed something wasn't quite right with the death certificate. The seal was there, the signature looked legitimate, the border, barcode, and filing number were all present, so what was the issue? Why wouldn't the nagging suspicion something was off go away? The death certificate was almost perfect, but for one small detail. The kind of detail nearly everyone overlooks when typing: a misspelled word. Look right here. Registry is spelled wrong. Just to be absolutely certain, the prosecutor called the Office of Vital Statistics and Registry of the New Jersey Department of Health to verify whether or not the death certificate was valid. And surprise, surprise, it was not. Meanwhile, Berger didn't exactly turn over a new leaf while he was dead. In November of 2019, the dead man was arrested in Delaware County, Pennsylvania for providing a false identity to law enforcement, among other charges, and was sentenced to a year for those charges. His perfidy was then discovered. He was extradited back to New York in early 2020 to face a charge of offering a false instrument for filing, which can garner up to 4 years in prison. Just another felony to go along with the felony charges to which he had already pled guilty. Unfortunately, I can't find any information on any sentences he may have received, but given the sheer number of felonies Berger committed, I hope they were all the maximum allowed and that they ran consecutively. How are you smart enough to forge an almost perfect death certificate, but not smart enough to use the spell checker on that forgery? Can you imagine getting caught, at least partly, by a spelling error? But it was that spelling error that put Robert Berger firmly in the chosen few. This one isn't just a chosen few video, because the subject of this story didn't conclude their criminal career after the events that are detailed within this video. You're going to want to stick around to the end to find out what happened. It's not pretty. On December 27, 2018, a 26-year-old man carrying a plastic shopping bag walked up to a bicycle locked into a bike rack. That's not unusual, I do admit that. Perhaps he just made a quick trip to his local Walmart or some other local business, like countless people do every day. What was unusual, however, was the contents of that bag, a bolt cutter. This wasn't just an innocent nighttime shopper after all. The man immediately went to work trying to cut the chain, preventing him from just taking off with the bike. Unluckily for the prospective bike thief, however, a police officer, one Sergeant Matt Okerman, was close by, figured out what he was doing, and arrested him. Sergeant Okerman was soon joined by other officers during that arrest. Now, you might be wondering why and how so many officers were in the area, especially for something as relatively minor as stealing a bicycle. And no, it was not a run to the local donut shop. 26-year-old Adam Alexander Vale, who is a career criminal with a string of arrests dating back to 2014, mostly for drug offenses, decided to make the unbelievably smooth-brained decision to attempt to steal the bicycle from outside the Gladstone police station. And I am not kidding. The name is literally on the window that was in clear view as Vale walked over to the chained-up bike. There was no possible way he could have missed it. Even the most underachieving second grader could have read those words and been smart enough to just nope out of there. Vale was charged with theft, criminal mischief, and felon in possession of weapons. But the fact he tried this outside of a clearly marked police station made him part of the chosen few. And then he had to go beyond the chosen few in one of the worst ways possible. He was arrested in February of 2019 for failure to appear on the 2018 charges, and some others. But the saddest part of this story is that he was arrested once again in March of 2019. This time for DUI after he crashed a stolen car he was driving as he was fleeing the police that were not in pursuit. That wasn't even the worst part. A female passenger, 19-year-old Heaven Lee Matthews, was killed in the crash, resulting in a manslaughter charge. The good part of this story is that Vale seems to be finally taking responsibility for his actions, as he pled guilty to several charges, including the manslaughter, and received an 85-month sentence, a permanent revocation of his driving privileges, and will be required to pay at least $45,000 in restitution. Heaven's death could have been entirely prevented had Vale not been released on the failure to appear charges. I will never understand a court system that allows repeat offenders out on bail, especially if that bail is for charges for which the offender has already failed to appear. Our justice system needs a total overhaul, starting with the policies regarding bail for repeat offenders and those who deliberately fail to appear in court to face up to their misdeeds. I either don't understand people anymore, or my mind is just refusing to dignify the stupidity. I look for and at this stuff all day, every day, and even I'm having trouble with this one. You will not believe this. Picture the scene. It's a typical Thursday morning in the Florida Keys. Yeah, it's a Florida woman story, because of course it is. 19-year-old Janiah Douglas was driving south on Card Sound Road from Homestead towards Key Largo. I've never been there, but I imagine hundreds of people doing the same every day. Miss Douglas, however, was witnessed speeding and otherwise driving recklessly by Sergeant Robert Dosh of the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. When Sergeant Dosh attempted to make a traffic stop, the young lady declined to cooperate, thus initiating a chase. None of the articles I've read about this incident indicate whether it was a high-speed chase or she just refused to stop for some time. Eventually, Miss Douglas did stop near County Road 905. When asked to explain why it took her so long to do so, she actually told Sergeant Dosh that getting arrested was, and I quote, on her bucket list since high school, end quote. Well, wish granted, smooth-brained. She was charged with one felony count of fleeing and eluding police, speeding her way straight into the lead for the chosen few. Even after telling it, the story doesn't get any better. I can't, y'all. I just can't. This is ridiculous. On September 10th, 2022, the Chapman Highway Walmart in Knoxville, Tennessee was hit by a shoplifter. That's not outside the norm, I admit, Even though I no longer catch shoplifters for a living, I managed to see someone shoplifting almost every time I ventured to any retail store. Walmart stores, on the whole, are hit pretty hard on an almost daily basis, but the thief in this case managed to steal a karaoke machine, some camping equipment, and 3 televisions. Whether it was all taken in one trip, I don't know, but it was certainly quite the haul regardless. Again, none of that is all that unusual. When police responded to the store, they couldn't believe what they found upon their arrival. This fine, upstanding gentleman, Donald Kirkland, a career criminal with at least 11 arrests between 2012 and 2022, tried to run, but he was quickly apprehended. Here's where the not-so-normal comes into play. What was most amazing, or bold, or stupid, take your pick, was that this smooth brain was actually selling his purloined prizes in the parking lot of the store he stole them from. Because that's where I would think to sell the merchandise I just stole. Kirkland was charged with theft of merchandise greater than $1,000, but less than $2,500. Selling the merchandise you just stole in the parking lot of the store from which you just stole it is one of the quickest ways to ensure your selection to the chosen few. The Chosen Few series is all about how the garbage sometimes takes itself out, often with little to no help from law enforcement. This story is no different, except in the way law enforcement got involved. Stick around, folks. This one's a doozy. On July 17, 2020, Wendy Lynn Ween was surfing the interwebs, looking for something very specific, something bold that could offer her a way to put a permanent end to one of her life's biggest problems. What she found was a website that declared the business has been, and I quote, providing solutions for issues since 1920, end quote. This website offers free consultations, proclaims its users' privacy is sacrosanct, features customer testimonials extolling the service, and even proudly announces that it's in full compliance with HIPAA. Wendy liked what she saw, so much so that she created an account, filled out a service request form about the issue she needed help with, first with a pseudonym, then with her actual name, and requested a consultation with one of the nearly 18,000 field operatives the site claims to have conducting business around the world. By now, I assume you're wondering what website she was using. What website could possibly put a permanent end to her biggest problem? For those who don't already know the story and how ridiculous it actually is, the website is called rentahitman.com. It's an obviously satirical website, but Wendy clearly didn't pick up on the plain-as-day clues. Clues like being HIPAA compliant. It's not the HIPAA you're used to hearing about, however, which deals with healthcare privacy. The HIPAA the website talks about is something completely different. The Hitman Information Privacy and Protection Act of 1964. It's important to note that that phrase is spelled out on the website in clear, unadorned language. How anyone thought this was a website that actually allowed someone to hire a legitimate hitman is utterly beyond me. After she filled out and submitted the service request form, the owner of the website asked Wendy 2 questions. Do you still require our services, and would you like to meet up with a field operative? When she answered in the affirmative, the website's owner turned her information over to the Michigan State Police. A meeting with an undercover state trooper posing as a hitman was then arranged, during which Wendy offered a total of $5,000 to have her ex-husband permanently ended, with a $200 down payment. She also provided her ex-husband's home and work addresses, along with his work schedule. After handing over the down payment, Wendy Lynn Ween was immediately arrested and charged with solicitation to commit murder, and later charged with using a computer to commit a crime. In January 2022, Wendy pleaded guilty to both charges and received 7 to 20 years in prison, with credit for the 545 days she had already served between her arrest and sentencing. To believe you can hire an actual hitman from a normal website that literally anyone can access at any time is an unbelievably smooth-brained move. It's just mind-boggling to me, and also immediately qualifies Wendy Lynn Ween for the chosen few. And just so you know, this will not be the last time I talk about the Rent a Hitman website in connection to a stupid criminal, and the next one might just be worse. On the morning of May 20th, 2020, Riverside Police responded to a commercial robbery call in which the owner reported several $100s of camera equipment had been stolen. Shortly before the call, the owner had been approached by a man looking to sell some camera equipment he had acquired. When he looked at said equipment, the owner strongly suspected it actually belonged to him. Declining the offer, the owner then hurried to his shop and discovered the break-in and theft. After calling the police, the owner quickly made his way back to the seller in an attempt to delay him until officers could arrive, but when they did, the seller immediately took off. After a short foot chase, officers apprehended the suspect in a nearby fenced-in area. When verifying the suspect's identity, it was discovered that the man, Johnny Robles, was on probation for resisting arrest, violence against the police, as well as drug and theft offenses. Color me shocked on that last one. As it turned out, old Johnny was released from jail just 2 days prior, due in part to jail overcrowding conditions, in addition to a controversial zero bail program in place at the time because of the pandemic. 2 days. Johnny lasted a whole 2 days on the street before getting himself in trouble again, proving that karma can actually be quick at times. The most ironic thing about this story is that his middle name is Angel, which is clearly unsuitable to him. But in any case, let's welcome Johnny to the chosen few. In July of 2016, police responded to a disorderly person complaint at a little after 4 a.m. in Linden, New Jersey. When they arrived on scene, they found 27-year-old Kyle Chambliss sitting in a vehicle and talking loudly on his cell phone. The officers then noticed the smell of alcohol on Mr. Chambliss and asked him to exit the vehicle. After being told to end the phone call, Chambliss became aggressive. Then he was told he was under arrest, and that's when things went weird. And when I say weird, I mean Chambliss's arrest went sideways in a way I've never heard before. Before I tell you how it went sideways, however, I want to stress that this is absolutely 100% true. In an apparent attempt to avoid arrest, Chambliss told officers he had to defecate. And, then he did. Right there. In his own pants. You cannot make this stuff up. His attempt was unsuccessful, so he resorted to using regular violence to resist arrest, striking one officer in the chest and kicking another in the leg before being pepper sprayed, then handcuffed. Kyle Chambliss was charged with resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, 2 counts of aggravated assault on a police officer, and was later found to have contempt warrants out of 3 separate New Jersey jurisdictions: Somerset County, Union County, and Bound Brook. I'm not sure I've ever heard of resisting arrest by defecation before, but one thing I am sure of is that it's a quick way to get yourself listed among the chosen few. And for the record, this Kyle Chambliss is not, I repeat, he is not the Kyle Chambliss that is or has been an adjunct professor at Camden County College. It's January 2016, El Dorado County, California. A California Department of Fish and Wildlife officer spotted a swerving vehicle occupied by 2 men and attempted to initiate a traffic stop. It did not go well. After a brief chase, the 2 men abandoned their vehicle and ran off into the frozen wilderness. They clambered down into a snow-filled canyon off of Route 50, then crossed the ice-cold American River to escape the officers pursuing them, which now included several El Dorado County deputies and some California Highway Patrol officers. After a few hours of wandering the frozen landscape, the pair came across a Forest Service officer. Although the officer wasn't close enough to effect an arrest, he managed to shout a warning to the men that they should surrender because they were in definite danger of freezing to death. His warning fell on deaf ears, however, as the fugitives ran off again. At this point, you might be wondering why the 2 men were so desperate to get away that they would risk freezing to death. Well, Tristan Crossland was a parolee, and his companion, Derek Diano, had 4 active arrest warrants. And to top it all off, the vehicle they were driving contained several unlicensed pharmaceuticals, as well as at least 1 firearm. An ex-con and a wanted man possessing all of that would be assured of lengthy prison terms, hence the escape attempt. Later that night, just before 9 p.m., a 911 operator received a call from Crossland, who told the operator that the 2 men were now actually worried about freezing to death and began pleading for a rescue. The El Dorado County Sheriff's Office sent elements of the SWAT team, dive team, and search and rescue teams out to find the fugitives, eventually locating them a little over 12 hours later, suffering from hypothermia and frostbite. The pair were treated at a local hospital before they were turned over to the Department of Wildlife to face several charges, including evading a peace officer, felons in possession of a firearm, obstruction, and several drug charges. One officer later said he'd never come across 2 men who were so happy to get into a warm, dry jail cell. The irony of Crossland and Diano pleading to be rescued by the same law enforcement they ran into the frozen wilderness to escape is not lost on me, and that irony is what makes them part of the chosen few. On Thursday, March 24, 2016, a Central Texas woman, Chastity Hobson, was arrested by the Granite Shoals Police Department for possession of less than 1 gram of a substance I'm not allowed to name, so let's just call it an unlicensed pharmaceutical. Her arrest was not all that unusual in and of itself. People get arrested by the thousands every day for that very thing. What was unusual, however, was how she got herself arrested. See, the Tuesday before her arrest, the Granite Shoals PD made a tongue-in-cheek Facebook post, which I'd love to quote, but I'm not willing to endanger my channel, so I'll just paraphrase the post here. If you have recently purchased various unlicensed pharmaceuticals in Central Texas, please take it to the local police or sheriff department so it can be screened with a special device. Do not use it until it has been properly checked for possible Ebola contamination. 2 days later, Ms. Hobson showed up at the Granite Shoals PD with her unlicensed pharmaceutical. Because of course she did. While I do applaud Ms. Hobson for her concern about a potentially lethal virus, I have to question her wisdom for thinking that taking her unlicensed pharmaceuticals to the police station for testing wouldn't get her arrested. By doing so, however, she definitively claimed her spot in the chosen few. For the record, I am acutely aware that some people will think this is entrapment, but it isn't even close. At no point did the police entice her to break the law. They merely provided her with a novel way to show them that she did. Meet Zachary Schmidt. In August of 2016, the then 25-year-old was cruising Interstate 78 in Pohatcong Township, New Jersey, in his white Jeep Grand Cherokee. At around 10 p.m., Mr. Schmidt activated blue emergency lights installed on his vehicle, flashed a placard emblazoned with the New Jersey State Police logo, and attempted to pull over another vehicle. Strangely enough, the other vehicle refused to stop. Why, you ask? Well, that car was being driven by an off-duty New Jersey State Trooper. After a few minutes, that trooper was able to contact a dispatcher about the situation, which led to an on-duty state trooper from the Perryville station locating and making a traffic stop of Schmidt and his faux police car. During the traffic stop, it was discovered that the placard with the New Jersey State Police logo that Schmidt was flashing as if it was a badge also had a Pennsylvania State Police logo on the other side. Chances are he either planned to cross into Pennsylvania and try something similar, or he already had and wasn't caught, although that couldn't be proven. I've seen a lot of unmarked police cars in my time. If you know what to look for, they're fairly easy to spot, but having a now retired cop as a father kinda gave me an advantage in that respect. Not once in my 30+ years of driving, however, have I seen a Jeep Grand Cherokee used as a police vehicle, marked or unmarked. I'm not saying they're not out there, just that I've never seen them. The moral of the story is don't pretend to be a cop if you aren't one, especially since the person you may try to pull over just might be an actual cop. Zachary Schmidt was arrested and charged with impersonating a public servant, and that's how Zachary Schmidt became part of the chosen few. The general public tends to believe that most crimes occur at some distance from the offender's home. Whether that's accurate or not, I'm not sure, but you'd think that committing a crime in an area where many people might know and recognize you would probably make for a very short criminal career. Personally, I'd think it would be a self-evident concept. Someone should probably have let the next contestant on the chosen few in on that particular concept before January 23rd, 2014, because that contestant and a bunch of friends decided it would be a good idea to rob a pizza delivery guy. Yeah, I know the pizza delivery person is a pretty easy target. They get robbed all the time. It never happened to me when I delivered for Pizza Hut, thank God, but it did happen to at least 2 of my coworkers. Not like this, though. Pizzas were ordered. Pizzas were made. Pizzas were sent out for delivery to a nearby trailer park in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. When the delivery driver arrived at the address and knocked on the door, however, he was immediately approached and surrounded by several individuals with firearms. Those individuals then proceeded to rob the driver of all the money he had on him, including his personal money and wallet. They even stole the pizzas. I mean, if you're going to rob someone, you might as well get the whole kit and caboodle, right? The delivery driver, while handing over everything he had, got a good look at a number of his assailants before those assailants fled the scene, and gave very detailed descriptions of them to responding officers. Those officers then questioned residents of the trailer park, asking if they knew anyone who fit any of those descriptions. Many of those residents pointed to the address where the pizzas were delivered. Police then found 20-year-old Michael Antonio Long, who fit one of those descriptions, living at that address. During a subsequent search of the home, the stolen pizzas, as well as the insulated bag they were carried in, were found. Long was arrested and charged with 1 count of first-degree robbery. I can find no information about any arrests of the other people involved, but more arrests were expected at the time. What kind of smooth brain orders pizza, then robs the delivery person from their own address? I know, I just answered my own question, but seriously, this isn't rocket science. I swear, every time I ask if people can get any dumber, they actually seem to be taking it as a challenge. At any rate, please welcome Michael Antonio Long to the Chosen Few. And please, like the video, share it, and subscribe or follow for more. There aren't many immutable rules to human existence. The only 2 I'm aware of, death and taxes, have been around almost since the dawn of time. I would, however, like to propose a third. Stupid people do stupid things, and they do them stupidly. Which brings us to today's contestant on The Chosen Few. Meet James Blankenship. In the early months of 2013, Jimmy and his mother had a disagreement. It was apparently bad enough that Jimmy's mother banned him from her home and property altogether. Now, I've argued with my mother on occasion, but I can't recall a time she ever banned me from her house. Granted, my mother isn't his mother, but if she's anything at all like mine, it had to be something relatively serious to catch a total ban. Flash forward to June of 2013. Jimmy and his mother still had not mended fences when she caught her son breaking into her house through a first-floor window. He hadn't been permitted in the house for at least 3 months, and according to news reports at the time, he had no possessions there to retrieve. In other words, he had no legitimate reason to be there. Upon his discovery, James beat a hasty retreat, running away through adjoining backyards. A neighbor happened to notice him and alerted police, who arrived a few minutes later and began a search for whomever the neighbor had seen. Jimmy was soon discovered hiding in a crawlspace under a nearby home and was arrested. You might be wondering how the neighbor saw him so clearly. After all, burglars are rarely seen, but if they are, they're not often recognized as such, except when they decide to make their getaway through someone's yard. Jimmy decided to break into his mother's house during the day, but not because most burglaries occur during daylight hours, statistically speaking. After he was caught, arrested, and initially charged with attempted burglary and breaking and entering, this smooth brain was dumbfounded because he actually believed a person could only be charged with burglary if the crime occurred at night. I'm not gonna lie, Jimmy seems special. When all was said and done, James Blankenship pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of breaking and entering against a homeowner's will, which was a charge I didn't even know existed, and was sentenced to 180 days in prison, with 120 days of that 180 suspended, and fined $100. I could find no information on whether or not he and his mother repaired their relationship, but that's okay, because Jimmy has a new home among the chosen few.
So it would seem that the market for truly smooth-brained criminals hasn't quite been cornered just yet. Arkansas is nipping at Florida's heels. Meet Christopher Douglas Hicks and Charles Eugene Ferris. These 2 geniuses were arrested on the 1st of April 2019 after Ferris was admitted to the hospital with a large red spot on his upper chest. I was unable to find any information on how the police initially got involved, but while being questioned at the hospital, Ferris first claimed that he was working as personal security and protecting an asset, got into a firefight with another man, and the so-called asset drove him to the hospital. I'm not entirely sure why Ferris thought anyone would believe such a fanciful story, but the reality, according to Ferris's wife, was that Ferris and Hicks were drinking together outside of the Ferris home when Ferris asked Hicks to shoot him in the chest with a .22 caliber rifle while wearing a bullet-resistant vest. And I'm not making that up. After Hicks very stupidly did so, Ferris got angry about being hurt, even though the vest protected him, then proceeded to empty an entire magazine from the rifle into the back of Hicks, who had put the vest on by that point, striking the vest 5 times. Hicks managed to escape with little more than a few bruises. Both men were arrested for aggravated assault, a Class D felony. Although the charge for Hicks was later dropped in this incident, it was not his first run-in with law enforcement, nor was it his last. Hicks has a record dating back to 2014, perhaps even earlier, for various offenses, including 2 DUIs, possession of a controlled substance, third-degree assault, with his latest arrest in 2022 for arson, when he allegedly set a neighbor's truck on fire after believing it was on the Hicks property. Ferris, on the other hand, had an almost non-existent police record until this incident, but has since been arrested 2 more times for aggravated assault, and was most recently arrested in 2022 when he was charged with aggravated cruelty to a cat, dog, or horse for killing a neighbor's dog with a crossbow. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison for that incident. Seriously, Arkansas? Y'all are really trying to out-Florida Florida? In this episode, we have not 1, but 2 contestants for The Chosen Few, and it's a Florida story. Because why not? Meet Kira Enders and Dakota Jones. Ms. Enders doesn't seem to have encountered law enforcement too often, at least in her adult life, but Dakota Jones, her boyfriend, is another matter entirely, with an arrest record in Florida dating back to at least 2011 for a variety of crimes, including domestic violence against a person 65 or older, violating a protective order, probation violations, robbery, using a computer to solicit or lure a child, multiple assault and battery charges, including at least 1 against an elected official, and a few contempt of court charges. Basically, he's a career criminal and apparently one with no real plans to get his life on track. The latest crime he is alleged to have committed, however, does not include violence, which is, at the very least, a tiny step in the right direction. This one was just forgery. Not the type of forgery that includes signing someone else's name to a check. No. Dakota Jones and Kira Enders decided to graft 2 separate scratch-off tickets together in an attempt to deceive Florida lottery officials into handing over a $1 million prize. Apparently, neither of these 2 smooth brains realized that the 2 tickets they used for this scheme had different and plainly visible serial numbers. I mean, if I was to attempt to fool lottery officials, I sure wouldn't go for such a large amount, which is absolutely guaranteed to bring a higher level of scrutiny. Having worked with scratch-off tickets in my younger years, one of the first things you learn is to ensure the serial numbers match, especially when it concerns larger prizes. Florida, I have to ask, what is in the water down there that makes people go all smooth-brained like this? Seriously, people really want to know. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one, so until the next time, stay safe out there.
So I came across this little gem a few days ago, and I instantly realized it deserved a spot among the chosen few. It's a Florida woman story, because of course it is. And it sounds like a joke, but it is 100% true. This woman has a string of arrests in Florida dating back to at least 2018. Given what most of them are for, or adjacent to, I'm pretty sure these are only her Florida arrests, but I can't really say that for certain. I first learned about her from an old TV news report, in which the anchor detailed how this woman was arrested in 2019, along with a friend, for possession of some unlicensed pharmaceuticals of the crystalline variety. It wasn't her first arrest, nor her last, the last coming in mid-January of 2023, or at least that's what I could find. Perhaps her parents were prescient, or they just didn't like her, I don't know, but what I find hilariously ironic about this woman's particular bad habit is what it shares with her. Her name is Crystal Methvin, and I am not making that up. Well, here's just a quick update about me trying to navigate this multiple sclerosis thing. I had my initial appointment with a neurologist. She said it's most likely secondary progressive MS, or SPMS, which is, from what I understand, one of the worst forms, if not the worst, of MS. Generally speaking, SPMS is the kind of MS where things just get worse over time, with no recovery or even partial recovery from symptoms. Things can be done to slow the progression of it, but basically, once a symptom presents itself, it's there to stay. So, I've either had MS for years and never presented any symptoms at all, or I skipped right to one of the worst forms of the disease. And since I'm one of the few Irish people you'll ever meet with consistently bad luck, it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was the latter. All that said, I've not yet entered the treatment phase of my MS journey, so I'm not sure when I'll be back to making full-time content, but I do hope to make videos when and if I can. I just saw this one and I knew I had to tell you all about it. Anyway, that's all I got for right now, so until the next time, stay safe out there. In September of 2017, then 33-year-old Sean Carter Harris walked into a gas station convenience store in LaPorte, Indiana, to grab a few items. Some food, drinks, and some cigarettes. This is not exactly a rare occurrence, to be sure. After selecting his items and getting the clerk to hand over the cigarettes, Harris implied he had a firearm and absconded with the merchandise. He drove away a few moments later, but didn't get very far. Why, you ask? Well, despite all the things he stole, the one thing, perhaps the most important thing, that Harris should have stolen but didn't, was gas for his vehicle, thus making the responding officer's job that much easier when he ran out of gas a short distance away and was found on the side of the road. Upon his arrest, it was determined that Harris, who was a career criminal with a string of arrests dating back to 2012, at least in Indiana, had a blood alcohol level well over the legal limit, although he was not charged for that. He was, however, charged with robbery. His last arrest, again at least in Indiana, was in May of 2022 for robbery and theft of at least $750, but less than $50,000 in value. I mean, if you're going to rob a gas station with a car that is low on fuel, you might as well go all out and steal some gas so you can at least make a decent attempt at a getaway. But you gotta love it when criminals practically arrest themselves through their own sheer stupidity. It really makes it easier on the police and makes it easier to add them to the chosen few. For the entirety of human history, jealousy has enticed people to commit a variety of crimes: harassment, stalking, arson, kidnappings, assaults of every kind, theft, and even murders. As heinous as some of those crimes have been, and they have been heinous, a person can almost understand the reasoning behind them. Almost. This one, however, pretty much takes the cake. On the 25th of January, 2021, in Mexico, a woman named Leonora was arrested after she attacked and stabbed her husband multiple times. When questioned about the attack, Leonora said she attacked her husband, Juan, because she found pictures of him having relations of the biblical kind with another woman. See? That's somewhat understandable, isn't it? Full disclosure time, my son's egg donor, and I call her that because she was never his mother, that honor belongs to my wife, cheated on me at about the time she got pregnant with him. I legitimately wasn't sure he was mine until the day he was born. Since he's my virtual twin and has been since his birth just over 3 decades ago, I can't deny he's mine. But had I found out who it was she cheated on me with and caught up with him, I probably wouldn't be doing this video today. I'd probably be in prison. So yeah, I can understand the impulse. That said, Leonora made a mistake. A mistake beyond seemingly trying to kill her husband, that is. See, Juan did indeed have the pictures on his phone, but they weren't what she thought they were. Juan had found the pictures in an old email and decided to save them on his phone, apparently for old time's sake. But he wasn't having an affair, not in 2021, nor prior to that. Those pictures were older, taken while Juan and Leonora were dating. There was no other woman. Those pictures were of a younger and thinner Leonora. Yep, she got violently jealous of herself. And that's how Leonora made it into the chosen few. Even if you're just a casual gamer, you've probably at least heard of Starfield, arguably one of the most highly anticipated games in a long time. It's actually one of the games I was truly looking forward to playing before this god-awful neuropathy in my left hand, so I get it. I really do. Darren Tyrone Harris, a resident of Tennessee and the latest contestant on The Chosen Few, apparently had that same anticipation. Unlike most people, he was able to play Starfield early. That in itself isn't exactly unusual, because review codes are given to various gaming media outlets and select gaming YouTubers all the time. Such review codes come with heavy restrictions, such as only recording limited gameplay footage, if that's even allowed at all, not putting out story spoilers, that kind of thing. There's usually also time restrictions on when reviews can be published prior to the game's release. Mr. Harris, who uses the online moniker of Memphian94, didn't have a review code. What he had was a job at a warehouse that was being used to distribute the game to retailers. He allegedly stole a copy of the game, recorded his gameplay, and started releasing that footage, roughly about 45 minutes worth, to various online platforms, including his YouTube channel. That video has since been taken down. But Memphian94 didn't stop with stealing a game and just releasing early gameplay footage. He allegedly stole an entire pallet full of copies of Starfield and was selling them on Mercari. an online shopping website similar to Temu or Wish. In an effort to prove to naysayers he actually had the goods, he even posted a video of himself using FedEx to send copies of Starfield to his customers and showing perhaps as many as 40 or more copies on the seat of a vehicle, all while showing his face and bragging about it. Basically, what we have here is another idiot who got himself caught and is now facing at least 2 felony counts. Harris was arrested on August 24th on charges of theft of property between $2,500 and $10,000, theft of property $1,000 or less, and possession of a controlled substance for some Mary Jane. Starfield is set for release on September 6th, with early access and other perks for those who pre-ordered certain editions. Although I'm reasonably certain buying a stolen copy of the game doesn't constitute a pre-order. Just saying.
I'm sorry for not putting out more content after saying I was back, but I haven't had much time to record anything. Plus, my entire family has been sick with some kind of chest cold. We've all passed whatever it is around the house. Twice. Because of course. Anyway, I didn't think you'd really appreciate hearing me hacking up a lung and sounding like a 3-pack-a-day smoker. That being said, I have been researching and writing when I can, which isn't nearly often enough, but I did come across a really disturbing story from the 1870s American West that I'm working on for a future video. Today, however, we're not going quite that far back in time. We're just going back to March of 2009, and trust me, it'll be worth it. In March of 2009, John Comparetto, a retired police chief from New York, entered a bathroom in a Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area Holiday Inn to use the facilities. As he walked in, he noticed a man washing his hands at the sink. Thinking nothing of it, he went into a stall. After finishing, Comparetto exited the stall only to be greeted with the barrel of a .40 caliber handgun, held by the man he'd seen just 3 minutes prior. That man demanded Comparetto hand over his money and phone, which the retired officer did. Before leaving the restroom, the man also warned Comparetto he would be shot if he was followed. Now, I don't know if you know anything about retired police officers, but one of their least favorite things is to be robbed at gunpoint. Also on their list of least favorite things is going anywhere unarmed, and Comparetto was not unarmed. Pulling his firearm from an ankle holster, he went after the armed offender. 19-year-old Jerome Blanchett, the offender, tried to make a quick getaway, but failed, both miserably and spectacularly. He was caught trying to get into a taxi in front of the hotel by almost a dozen police officers, who were attending a convention at the Holiday Inn, where there were signs announcing the convention all over the hotel that Blanchett had to see. And no, I am not making that up. Blanchett was charged with robbery, reckless endangerment, carrying a firearm without a license, illegal possession of a firearm, making terroristic threats, and simple assault. Those charges are bad enough, with pretty hefty sentences if convicted, but probably manageable for a 19-year-old who still had the majority of his life ahead of him. Unfortunately for Blanchett, however, he committed this robbery while out on bail for 3 other robberies. Upon his convictions for all 4 robberies, he received a sentence of 52 to 104 years in prison, with the judge saying the crimes were brutal and senseless, and he would personally oppose any attempts at an early parole for Blanchett. Jerome Blanchett is currently a guest at the Houtsdale State Correctional Institution in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. You know you've made it to the top spot in the chosen few when the judge says he'll personally oppose your parole.
We all know some criminals are among the dumbest people on the planet. I mean, this series is all about some of them after all, but I never thought I'd find someone as ridiculously stupid as Jonathan Rivera. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Or fortunately, depending on your point of view. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can find a video about him on my channel titled, If Stupid Was a Person. Go watch it. I'll wait. Good, you're back. Well, let's get on with this video. On Monday, March 28, 2022, the presence of Brandy Jones was requested at the East County Hall of Justice in Dublin, California, after being arrested for stealing a car. That in itself wasn't all that unusual for Ms. Jones, as she had an extensive criminal record by that point, to include at least 2 prior arrests for stolen vehicles. This time, however, was slightly different. At around 11 o'clock that morning, the Dublin police were alerted by a license plate reader that a Ford Econoline van, which had been reported stolen, had entered the city. After some searching by patrol officers, the van was located in the parking lot of the courthouse. Because of course it was. The cops kept watch on the van, which came complete with a punched ignition, but they didn't have to wait all that long before Ms. Jones exited the courthouse after her appearance and climbed into the driver's seat. She was arrested shortly thereafter. A search of the stolen van also revealed some unlicensed pharmaceuticals of the crystalline variety and 2 glass pipes. Miss Jones was transported to Santa Rita Jail, located less than a mile away from the courthouse, so her home away from home wasn't that far away. Her bail was set at almost $58,000. I really couldn't find any more information about this case, but at no time did I think I'd have to do another video about another smooth brain that stole a car to go to court for stealing a car. It is, however, a quick way to bring someone straight to the top of the chosen few.
Back in March of 2018, a man in the UK pled guilty to burglary and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Now, I grant you that it seems like a normal sentence for a burglar, but what wasn't normal was what happened during that burglary. The burglary occurred on February 9th, 2018, when then 51-year-old Derek Mulvaney broke into a house while the homeowner was at work. Seems reasonable enough, right? I mean, if I was going to burglarize a home, I know I wouldn't want the residents to be at home and increase the chances I got caught or the chances of a confrontation. Except Mulvaney's attempt was apparently still ill-timed, or he was too engrossed in his work and stuck around too long, because the victim came home from work while Mulvaney was still in the house. Mulvaney quickly hid in a room on the second floor, hoping the victim wouldn't notice anything awry. The homeowner might not have noticed, but his dog certainly did. The dog started barking at the half-closed door of the room that Mulvaney had taken refuge in. Mulvaney panicked, burst out of the room, and attempted to bull rush past the victim. It didn't work. The victim did manage to restrain Mulvaney and march him downstairs. Mulvaney begged and pleaded to be let go. The victim agreed, but with one condition. The victim would take a picture of the burglar. Mulvaney submitted to that demand and was released by the victim. That picture was then turned over to the police, who arrested Mulvaney 11 days later, although that arrest was only effected after some public pressure. Derek Mulvaney had been unknown to Kent police at the time of his arrest, but was later discovered to have a lengthy criminal record, with several convictions for burglary and theft outside of Kent. I'm not smooth-brained enough to consider burglary a viable career path, but hypothetically, if I did, I'm not sure I'd bargain a picture of my face for my freedom, especially since that picture would likely lead to my arrest anyway. At any rate, please welcome Derek Mulvaney to the chosen few. In April of 2024, Southold, New York police responded to a call for a suspected domestic violence incident. When they attempted to make contact with the alleged abuser, the man took off, leading the cops on a 45-minute chase crisscrossing the eastern part of Long Island with speeds reaching 100 miles an hour. The alleged abuser, who has not been publicly named as of this recording, turned onto Sound Road in Greenport, then made one of the smoothest of smooth-brained decisions I've ever heard. And given that stupid criminals making stupid decisions are this channel's bread and butter, that's saying something. As you can see on the map, Sound Road dead ends. What you can't see on the map is the approximately 100-foot cliff. According to police, the alleged offender never slowed down, never even hit his brakes. The vehicle hit an embankment, flew over the cliff's edge, hit the beach about 100 feet below, and landed in 3 to 5 feet of water of the Long Island Sound. After officers were forced to dive into the water to pull the man out of the car, he complained of some pain, but had no visible injuries. This is one of those cases that I truly wish the smooth brain involved was identified by name, just so I could research his criminal history to find out if there's any other stupidity in his past. Even so, please welcome the Long Island smooth brain to the chosen few. Did you know that an average of 22 United States veterans end their own lives every day? Every day. That is unacceptable to me. We need to do more. We have to do something to help keep our brothers and sisters in arms from becoming one of that 22 a day. Please, if you need help, I'm begging you to call 1-800-273-8255 and press 1 for veteran, or dial 988 to talk to someone. Do not give up. Do not give in. There are people out there who love you and need you to stick around. That 22 a day is why I designed these shirts to call attention to the issue. The last time I sold a version of this design, it was my best-selling design ever. I wound up donating around $200 for suicide prevention. And they're even cheaper this time around. All of them are just $5 above the cost to print, and 50% of the profits will go to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. As proof, at the end of every month, I'll post screenshots of my sales page from Teespring and from the donation page from AFSP. This is a cause that means a great deal to me, so I hope you can help out. I rarely ask for anything from the followers and subscribers of True Crime Portal, but I will ask you to share this video as far and wide as you can. Stay safe out there. Once again, we have a story that has no verifiable pictures of the smooth brain involved, but this one was too good to pass up. In May of 2014, across the pond in the UK, a burglar illegally entered a home's garage in Murfield, West Yorkshire. The burglar, according to news reports, was looking for valuables to sell so he could buy some of the unlicensed pharmaceutical commonly referred to as horse or smack. He did manage to grab a crate of beer. Grabbing that crate, however, didn't prevent the burglar from sampling that beer and some popsicles he found in the freezer, also located in the garage. After drinking a few of the beers, the burglar removed his dentures to eat a few popsicles. I don't know why he felt the need to remove his dentures to eat the frozen treats, but remove them he did. The 58-year-old homeowner discovered the theft the next day, reported it to the police, then found the false teeth a few days after that. I don't know if the burglar, in his drunkenness, forgot where he left them or just forgot them altogether. The dentures were then traced to a Justin Stansfield, I can only assume through a serial number, which led to his arrest for this burglary. The police didn't have to look too hard for Stansfield, however, because he was already in custody for a different attempted burglary. Stansfield had been chased out of another house, although it's unclear whether this was on the same night, when that victim was awakened after Stansfield caused some noise during that break-in. The police found him in a drunken stupor about 20 minutes later, surrounded by some stolen beer. When Stansfield was searched, that victim's house key was found in his possession, implying he planned to return to the man's house at a later time. Justin Stansfield was sentenced to 16 months for the two burglaries, but he's also stolen his way into the chosen few. In this video, we travel back to 2015, and if you've ever wondered how Florida Man became the meme it is today, consider this story. It might just be the most Florida Man story ever. The weekend before Thanksgiving 2015, an 81-year-old father, John Knudsen, argued with his 44-year-old namesake, John Jr., about the latter's lack of employment. That's perfectly understandable. I mean, what senior citizen father wants to perpetually support an adult son who seems perfectly capable of working for a living, but doesn't? Junior, however, apparently took great offense to that. He didn't want to go to work. That lack of ambition got even worse after Junior learned sometime that week that he was the sole beneficiary of his father's estate. What that estate was worth isn't specified, but it must have been just tempting enough, because Junior made a really shocking decision early that Thanksgiving morning. And by shocking, I meant he held 2 live electrical wires to his father's chest to electrocute the man. As an attempt to end someone's life, I'll admit that it's a new one on me. I mean, outside of a movie, this is legitimately the first time I've ever heard of anything like it. That said, as novel an attempt it was, it still failed. Old man Knudsen must have been much stronger than Junior thought because, aside from briefly losing consciousness, there didn't seem to be much of an ill effect. Dad waited for Junior to leave the room where he thought he committed patricide before sneaking out of the house and alerting Ormond Beach police. Junior was charged with attempted first-degree murder, aggravated battery on a person over 65, and aggravated abuse of an elderly or disabled person. I could find no information about a trial, plea bargain, or sentences received, but I hope the state of Florida did its usual thing, threw the book at him, and he's still serving a long, long sentence. And that, my friends, is a shocking way to get into the chosen few. Far be it from me to offer advice to the smooth-brained criminals out there, but if you're hauling some unlicensed pharmaceuticals and a ton of cash worth a combined value of nearly $1 million, it might be a good idea to double, triple, or perhaps even quadruple check your route, even with the GPS, to avoid accidentally crossing an international border. That little bit of advice might have been of some benefit to the next contestant of the Chosen Few, because on the 2nd of May, 2023, 60-year-old Andrew Lee Toppenberg of Tustin, California, accidentally entered the line of traffic to cross the US-Canadian border at the Rainbow Bridge port of entry near Niagara Falls. Now, I looked everywhere I could think of for a picture of old Andrew and found nothing publicly available, but he apparently entered incorrect information into his GPS. Arriving at the border crossing without his passport, Toppenberg's vehicle was then subjected to some extra scrutiny. Apparently, that scrutiny was warranted, as the Canada Border Services Agency found nearly 400 pounds of vacuum-packed marijuana, worth approximately $262,000 to $524,000 US, along with almost $603,000 in cash. Toppenberg was arraigned on the 5th of May, charged with possession with intent to distribute, importing cannabis, and, this is a new one on me, the possession of the proceeds of property over $5,000, knowing that all or part of those proceeds were obtained by a crime in the United States. He was held without bail and was awaiting trial. I couldn't find anything about whether that trial has occurred or any sentences he might have received, but the fact that he went through a border crossing accidentally with that much money and Mary Jane while using a GPS earns Andrew Lee Toppenberg his place among the chosen few. Imagine you want to buy a new car, but you're lacking the funds to do so. What do? Finance it? I mean, that's what most people would do. But that's not what the next smooth brain in the chosen few did. And it's a Florida man story. On Monday, July 27th, 2020, Casey William Kelly entered a Porsche dealership in Destin looking to buy a new car. He wasn't interested in getting financing for the car, though. Financing is for the poor. He was going to pay cash, or the next best thing, a cashier's check. $139,203.05 later, Kelly drove away with a brand new Porsche 911 Turbo. Now, you'd think that would be satisfying for most people, right? I know that when I bought my Dodge Charger, I was a happy man. Not Casey Kelly, though. He was an important man. After all, he'd just bought a new 911 and still had money to burn. So on the 28th of July, he went to a jeweler in Miramar Beach with another check. This one made out for $61,521, and tried to buy 3 Rolex watches. I say tried because the jeweler made the decision to hold on to the watches to make sure the check cleared. That turned out to be a smart decision, because the jeweler learned from the bank the next day that the check was a fake. The jeweler then contacted law enforcement, which then opened an investigation. That wound up being a quick investigation for a reason I'll get into shortly, and they arrested Casey Kelly later that day. Now, I don't know if you're at all familiar with what a cashier's check looks like, but it's more akin to an old school paper paycheck than a regular everyday check from your checkbook. One thing it does not have on it, at least in my experience, is the name of the payer. What does have your name on it is the paperwork you have to fill out when you buy a new car. Yeah, the check the car dealership accepted was also fake, and the car was reported stolen. Upon his arrest, Kelly told the police that he printed the checks at home using his computer and that he didn't see the big deal because, wait for it, he used his own account number on the checks. And you have no idea how much I wish that was a joke. Casey William Kelly was booked into the Walton County Jail on 1 count each of grand theft auto and fraud, uttering false bill, note, check, or draft. Kelly has a fairly long arrest record in Florida dating back to 2010, with charges ranging from contempt of court for violating a domestic violence protective order, to DUI, to grand larceny, along with several charges of forgery, including a very similar case to the one outlined in this video in December of that same year, 2020. In any case, let's welcome Casey Kelly into what seems to be one of the few things in his life he has legitimately earned, his place in the chosen few. I swear, just when I think people can't get any dumber, Florida man shows up and says, "Hold my beer!" In my search for stupid criminals to add to the chosen few, I often come across stories that don't have enough detail for their own separate videos, no matter how much I look for it. I can verify the stories are true and the incidents are real, but that's about the extent of it. It's also difficult to determine what punishments the offenders received with regards to incidents in the past. It goes without saying that any ongoing incidents mentioned have yet to be resolved. Due to the scant publicly available information about these incidents, there are few, if any, legitimate pictures of the individuals involved, so I'm using mostly stock footage in this video. With that in mind, here are a few criminals that went full smooth brain. Number 1. On the 7th of February 2014, then 18-year-old Steven Diaz walked into a Vons supermarket to grab something for a little get-together with friends. He wasn't there for snacks or sodas though. He was looking for some discount wine, but he also wasn't interested in any kind of wine that was on sale. He wanted a full 100% discount. The shoplifting kind of discount. Store security attempted to apprehend him as he was leaving. He fought with the guard, punched him in the face, but dropped the wine and got away. Briefly. See, not only did he drop the wine, he also dropped his wallet in the tussle with the guard. After the police made contact with Diaz, he turned himself in the following day. He was charged with attempted robbery and posted a $50,000 bond. What, if any consequences he received, have been lost to time. Number 2. In August of 2007, then 27-year-old Justin John Bolden punched a 59-year-old woman in her face when she tried to use her cell phone to call the police. Apparently, he began screaming at the woman to show him some respect while they were waiting for a bus in St. Paul, Minnesota. When a 63-year-old man stepped in to defend the woman, Bolden hit the older man with the folder he'd been carrying, causing the folder to drop to the ground. Bolden failed to retrieve the folder as he made his getaway once he heard the police sirens approaching, and that decision wound up being his undoing, because within that folder, there were several items that identified him by name. The biggest irony is that folder and its contents were from an anger management class. It was clearly not an effective class for him. When I searched online for Justin John Bolden, mugshots of a man with his name and of the appropriate age did come up, with at least a dozen arrests for a variety of offenses going all the way back to 2019, although this particular incident was not mentioned. Without that to positively identify him as the Justin John Bolden, I decided not to use his picture in this video. Number 3. 2 smooth-brained college students from Taiwan, whose names I will not try to pronounce for fear of butchering them, were arrested in January of 2024 for their alleged involvement in an insurance fraud scheme. One of the men bought a number of insurance policies for himself: life insurance, travel insurance, accident insurance, all totaling approximately $1.3 million in the weeks leading up to January 2023. On January 26, 2023, that man went to a hospital with severe frostbite on his legs. The frostbite was so bad that the amputation of both legs was required from about the mid-calf area. He claimed he got the frostbite by riding a motorcycle around Taipei, and the 2 men were, in fact, seen doing just that on the 26th, although whether that was by eyewitnesses or CCTV cameras is unclear. The hospital staff became convinced that his injuries were self-inflicted, as they could see no marks from socks or shoes, and the injuries seemed entirely too uniform to be from exposure to the elements. As Taiwan is subtropical, the temperature that day was also noted to be between 42 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, nowhere close to being cold enough to cause frostbite. The men received just $7,200 from the insurance policies before some of the insurance companies apparently canceled the policies because their purchases and the requests for payout were suspiciously close in time. According to investigators, the man's legs were allegedly immersed in dry ice for at least 10 hours to cause the injuries. Both men have been charged with fraud and embezzlement and are presently awaiting trial. Number 4. In April of 2012, a then 20-year-old Kentucky man named Michael Baker was arrested for theft by unlawful taking after siphoning gas from a Jenkins Police Department police cruiser. He wasn't caught in the act, though. This smooth brain was caught because his girlfriend took a picture of him as he committed the crime, a picture which he then posted on his Facebook page. It took the cops a couple of days to track Baker down, but track him down they did. It's unknown what punishment, if any, Baker faced for this incident. Although I couldn't find a mugshot for Baker, it does appear that he stayed out of trouble since 2012, at least in Kentucky. This is the first video of a series I'm tentatively calling Dishonorable Mentions. Let me know what you think, and if anyone can think of a better name, drop it in the comments. I can't make any promises, but I will definitely consider all suggestions. Anyway, that's all I've got for now, so until the next time, stay safe out there. Welcome to the latest installment of Dishonorable Mentions, wherein we outline various candidates for the chosen few who, for various reasons, didn't get full videos. Reasons such as no verifiable pictures of the smooth brains involved, or the news reports weren't detailed enough to tell an entire, albeit short, story. Sometimes the most I can do is verify that the stories are true. But first, I want to apologize for my absence this week. I've not been feeling all that well, and this coming week might not be great either. I start the Ocrevus infusions for my MS on Wednesday. I'm not exactly thrilled about sitting with a needle in my arm for hours, nor am I sure how I'm going to react to the medication, and the side effects don't sound fun. All things being equal though, if Ocrevus can help slow the progression of the MS, I'm willing to give it a try. Anyway, on with the video. Number 1. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, a man named Jacob Wise was arrested for shoplifting after removing the security tags stores commonly affix to clothing. As a former retail worker, I can attest that those things are not easy to remove, even with the correct tools to do so. Mr. Wise failed to live up to his name, however, because he was apprehended after setting off the door alarms as he attempted to exit the store. Why? Because after removing the security tags, he put them in his pocket. I am not kidding. I believe Mr. Wise should think about adding an "un" to the start of his last name, just for truth in advertising purposes. Number 2. Meet Relaford Cooper III. He has a long and fairly violent criminal record, with charges that include contempt of court, drug possession, armed robbery, inflicting bodily harm, possession of a weapon by a convicted felon, and aggravated assault. But he's not included here for any of those things. No, he's here because in October of 2015, he led police on a high-speed chase. Why would such a fine, upstanding gentleman do such a thing? Well, he was drunk. When he crashed his car, he then led the police on a short foot pursuit. He was found hiding in a nearby church by members of the congregation who chased him outside into the waiting arms of the Manatee County deputies. Upon his arrest, he told the arresting officers that he wasn't driving. It was the dog. That's not a joke, he actually said that. This has to be the first time I've ever heard what is essentially the dog ate my homework defense outside of middle school, but it is a Florida man story, so maybe I shouldn't be all that surprised. Number 3. In October 2023, a woman in Muncie, Indiana decided to visit a used car dealership to test drive a 2013 Kia Optima. Not all that unusual, I admit. Tens of thousands of people test drive cars every day. What happened next, however, was unusual. The employee readying the car for the test drive had to answer the phone, a phone that had been ringing off the hook for some time, although nobody was ever on the other end. The employee asked the woman to wait a moment. When that employee returned, the car and the woman were gone. Needless to say, the police were called. As part of the investigation, the police were able to use traffic cameras to track the car to Indianapolis, over an hour away. At this point, you might be thinking it's just a typical auto theft case. Except it wasn't. See, the accused car thief returned the vehicle that night. Kinda. She actually left the car in the parking lot of the mall next to the dealership from which she stole it. Kasia Shelton, the alleged car thief, was tracked down because, and I'm not joking here, she was recognized by the employee as someone who had previously filled out forms to buy a different car. Oh, and the reason she stole the vehicle was because she needed to get to Indianapolis for a job interview, as a stripper. She was confused by her arrest because she thought all was well and good since she returned the car. On top of all that, the car was actually stolen from the mall parking lot because Ms. Shelton left the keys in it, but it was eventually recovered in Anderson. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. Number 4. For the love of all that's holy, I implore you to stay away from the booger sugar, folks. It can create way too many problems in life, not the least of which is a more than 2-decade-long rap sheet, like in this Florida man story. In July of 2017, career criminal David Blackman called 911 to report his car was broken into. The thief took $50 and a quarter ounce of an unlicensed pharmaceutical, When the deputy responding to the call found some more of that unlicensed pharmaceutical in Blackman's vehicle, along with a rock of a different unlicensed pharmaceutical and the associated pipe to smoke it, Mr. Blackman was arrested for possession of paraphernalia, and resisting arrest without violence. Blackman has a long criminal history, as previously mentioned, which dates back to 2001. A history that includes multiple drug charges, endangering a child, child neglect, trespassing in an occupied dwelling, battery, and several probation violations. Look, I've never partaken in illicit drugs, but given how addictive nicotine is, I do at least partially understand that compunction. What I do not understand is calling the police to report the theft of things you know are illegal. Every time. It's a Florida man story every time.
Well, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, go ahead and hit that thumbs up and subscribe or follow the channel. Just those two things alone help the channel and this video be seen by more people. Until the next time, stay safe out there.